Introduction: imagine waking up on a floating white cloud, surrounded by marble pillars that hover in midair, under a sky that never changes. With the unsettling feeling that everyone's watching you, welcome to Mount Olympus. But don't be fooled by the statues or heroic tales. The truth is, living among the Greek gods was no paradise. There was no peace, no rest, just eternity, power, and a lot of divine drama. In this video, we'll slowly wander through the invisible corridors of Olympus, not as tourists, but as someone who lives there, who has to survive daily among ancient grudges, fragile alliances, and endless egos. If you thought the Greek gods were wise and serene, it's time to turn off the light, close your eyes, and listen, because you wouldn't last a single day on Olympus. Let's start with what seems like order in this celestial realm, the divine hierarchy, where looks can be deceiving, and the king doesn't always rule. Segment 1, the divine hierarchy. Zeus wasn't the leader. You think he was? We've heard it 1,000 times. Zeus, king of the gods, sitting on a golden throne, hurling lightning bolts from the skies. But even within the myths, his power wasn't absolute. Zeus was the youngest of his siblings, saved in secret by his mother, so he wouldn't be swallowed by his father, Cronus. His rise came after a 10-year war against the Titans, a victory not of wisdom but brute force. And yet, Olympus wasn't unified through loyalty. Hera, both his sister and wife, despised him for his constant affairs. Poseidon, his brother, plotted to overthrow him more than once. Hades, banished to the underworld, hardly showed up when he did. Tension filled the air. And the children Zeus fathered, countless demigods, born of affairs with mortals and nymphs, many by force, were left to fend for themselves. Zeus wasn't a peaceful ruler. He ruled by fear, manipulation, and punishment. Olympus wasn't a kingdom. It was a dysfunctional divine family. And their king? Just another player trying to keep it all from collapsing?
Title, jealousy, envy, and vengeance among the gods. They say the gods were perfect, shining, eternal, floating above us in golden palaces, their laughter echoing in the sky like distant thunder. But what if I told you that Mount Olympus wasn't filled with peace, but with whispers, with stares that cut deeper than swords, and with love that turned to rage in silence? Tonight, we're going to drift through the emotional storm behind the myths, not the heroic battles or the epic quests, but what the gods felt, what they couldn't say, what they envied, what they hated, and who they destroyed because of it. Because on Olympus, having everything wasn't enough. You had to be the most admired, the most desired, and when you weren't, even immortality couldn't save you from jealousy. From the ache of watching someone else be worshipped more than you, from knowing that even with all the beauty and power in the universe, you could still feel alone. In the soft glow of divine eternity, love wasn't simple. It was dangerous. It started with glances across banquet halls, and ended with curses whispered beneath the stars. So breathe slowly, let your body rest, and allow yourself to wander up those mythical marble steps, past the clouds, into a world where gods fell in love like mortals, but fought like monsters. Welcome to the quiet chaos of divine desire. Imagine living in a place where no one grows old, where everything you touch is perfect, eternal, harmonious. And yet, each day is filled with side glances, quiet sighs, and whispers behind golden pillars. On Mount Olympus, everyone had everything, but no one had peace. Because even gods were, in many ways, very human. Love wasn't pure. It was a battlefield of egos the gods loved deeply. But they didn't know how to love without controlling, competing, or hurting. Love wasn't healing. It was desire, obsession, and sometimes punishment. The myth of Adonis, the mortal who set the gods on fire. Adonis was no ordinary man. He was mortal, but his beauty was beyond divine. So beautiful, in fact, that two powerful goddesses fell in love with him. Aphrodite, goddess of love, and Persephone, queen of the underworld. According to one version of the myth, Aphrodite discovered the newborn Adonis, and, knowing his beauty would cause trouble, hid him inside a sealed chest and gave it to Persephone to keep safe in the underworld. But when Persephone opened the chest and saw him, she, too, fell hopelessly in love, and she refused to give him back. Both goddesses claimed him. Their jealousy burned like stars. They argued, pleaded, threatened, and so the dispute reached Zeus. Zeus, weary of more divine conflict, tried to be diplomatic. He divided the year. Adonis would spend 1/3 of the year with Persephone, 1/3 with Aphrodite, and 1/3 wherever he wished. But even this wasn't peace. Some say Adonis chose to spend all his free time with Aphrodite, deepening Persephone's silent rage. Others say he tried to be fair, but love never balances well when shared. A tragic end, and a blooming legacy one day. While hunting alone, Adonis was gored by a wild boar and died in Aphrodite's arms. Some say the boar was sent by Artemis, goddess of the hunt, out of spite. Others believe it was Ares, Aphrodite's former lover, transformed into a beast by jealousy to kill his rival. Aphrodite mourned deeply, and from Adonis spilled blood, she caused the first anemone flowers to bloom. In yet another version, Persephone refused to let him go entirely, and so Adonis was granted resurrection. He would spend part of the year alive and the other part dead, with Persephone in the underworld. Thus, his life became a cycle between light and shadow, echoing the seasons. Life and death, blooming and decay. In the end, Adonis wasn't just a mortal of beauty. He was a mirror showing how even gods could become vulnerable, desperate, emotional, over love, over pride, over what they couldn't control. So, as you let your body sink deeper into rest, picture this: golden halls filled with laughter that hides resentment, eternal beings who fall in love like mortals, but never forget, never forgive. Olympus was beautiful, yes, but it was also a storm of emotion, locked in time, a place where love never ended, and peace never truly began. Segment 3. Cruel punishments for petty offenses. The gods' unforgiving wrath. You might assume gods punished evil, that they were just and wise, that their divine judgment was meted out with fairness and a clear understanding of right and wrong. But in the hushed annals of Greek mythology, a different truth emerges, one where divine punishment was wildly, shockingly disproportionate. You could make the smallest mistake, perhaps an unwitting slight, a moment of fleeting pride, or even an act of kindness, and suffer for eternity. Listen closely as the faint echoes of ancient torments drift through the stillness. Prometheus, the fire thief. Picture the scene. Early humanity, shivering in the cold, fumbling in the darkness, struggling for mere survival. And then imagine Prometheus, a titan, witnessing their plight. His heart, unlike the Olympian gods, swelled with compassion. He saw their potential, their yearning for knowledge, and he made a choice that would echo through the ages. He stole fire, the sacred flame from Mount Olympus, the very essence of divine power, and gifted it to humans. It was a gift of survival, a beacon of warmth against the encroaching night, a spark for innovation, for crafting tools, for cooking food. But for this act of profound generosity, for extending a hand to struggling mortals. Zeus, the mighty king of the gods, unleashed his terrible wrath. Prometheus wasn't simply banished or imprisoned. No, his punishment was a crafted agony. He was chained to a towering rock in the desolate Caucasus Mountains, his body exposed to the elements, and each day a monstrous eagle, a symbol of Zeus's relentless cruelty, would descend upon him, tearing into his flesh, devouring his liver. And each night, as the stars wheeled overhead, that liver would regenerate, whole and fresh, only for the gruesome cycle to begin anew at dawn. Helping humans, an act of pure benevolence in mortal eyes, was, in the gods' eyes, the ultimate betrayal and affront to their exclusive dominion. It was a stark reminder of their power, a chilling testament to the price of defiance. Arachne the Weaver. Now, shift your gaze to a more delicate, yet equally tragic tale. That of Arachne. A young mortal woman from Lydia. Arachne was a weaver, but not just any weaver. Her skill with thread and loom was legendary. Her tapestries were so intricate, so vibrant, so lifelike, that nymphs would leave their streams and forests just to marvel at her artistry. People whispered that her hands must have been blessed by Athena herself, the goddess of crafts and wisdom. But Arachne, perhaps fueled by youthful pride, made a fatal error. She declared that her skill surpassed even that of Athena. This was not a challenge born of malice, but perhaps a boast, an innocent overestimation of her own immense talent. Yet, such a claim, when directed at a god, was an unforgivable offense. Athena, hearing of Arachne's boasts, appeared before her, disguised as an old woman, urging her to retract her words. Arachne resolutely refused, challenging the goddess to a contest. Athena, shedding her disguise, accepted. Both wove magnificent tapestries. Athena's depicted the grandeur of the gods and the dire consequences of defying them. Arachne's, however, was a masterpiece of beauty and truth, depicting the gods' own failings and deceptions of Zeus's various illicit affairs, Poseidon's tricks. Even Athena herself could not find a flaw in Arachne's work. But rather than admiration, Athena felt only burning rage. Not for blasphemy, perhaps, but for the piercing truth of Arachne's art, and certainly for hurting divine pride. In a fit of fury, Athena tore Arachne's tapestry to shreds and struck her repeatedly. Overwhelmed by shame and despair, Arachne tried to hang herself. But Athena, in a cruel twist of mercy, saved her only to transform her into a spider. Her punishment, to be forced to weave forever, spinning threads from her own body, a perpetual, silent reminder of her audacious skill and the goddess's unforgiving ego. Sisyphus the clever mortal. Consider next the plight of Sisyphus, the cunning king of Corinth. Sisyphus was known for his cleverness, his quick wit, and his ability to outmaneuver even the most formidable adversaries. He founded the Isthmian Games, promoted navigation and commerce, and was generally a powerful and prosperous ruler. But Sisyphus also had a troublesome habit. He cheated death. The first time, he captured Thanatos, the personification of death, binding him in chains. For a time, no one on earth could die, causing chaos and anger among the gods. Ares, the god of war, was particularly displeased, as his battles were no longer ending in fatalities. Zeus intervened, freeing Thanatos and ensuring death returned to the world. Sisyphus, however, had another trick up his sleeve. Before his actual death, he instructed his wife not to perform the usual burial rites. When he arrived in the underworld, he complained to Persephone, Hades' wife, that his wife had neglected her duties. He convinced her to allow him to return to the world of the living to scold his wife and ensure proper burial. Once back among the living, Sisyphus naturally refused to return to the underworld, enjoying his second lease on life for many years. Eventually, Hermes, the messenger god, was sent to drag him back. His sentence, handed down by Zeus himself, was famously agonizing: to eternally push a massive boulder uphill to the summit of a mountain, only to watch it roll back down just as it reached the top. His labor was endless, his hope perpetually crushed. His real crime, not murder, not grand theft, but the audacity of outwitting the gods, of daring to challenge their authority over life and death. His cleverness, a mortal virtue, became his eternal curse. Tantalus, the host from hell. Our final tragic figure is Tantalus, a king of Sipylus, who is favored by the gods and even invited to dine with them on Olympus. This was an unprecedented honor, a testament to his perceived status and connection to the divine. But Tantalus, perhaps in a misguided attempt to test the gods' or perhaps to simply prove his own cunning, committed a truly heinous act. He served his own son, Pelops, dismembered and cooked, as food to the gods at a banquet. He believed the gods would not notice, that he could trick them. But the gods, with their divine wisdom, immediately saw through the gruesome deception. All of them recoiled in horror, except for Demeter, who, grief-stricken over the abduction of her daughter Persephone, unknowingly ate a portion of Pelops' shoulder. The gods, disgusted by Tantalus's hubris and unspeakable crime, resurrected Pelops, replacing his missing shoulder with ivory. And Tantalus, his punishment was uniquely cruel, a perpetual torment in the underworld that mirrored his crime against hospitality and sustenance. He was condemned to stand in a pool of water that reached his chin, beneath a fruit tree laden with ripe, delicious fruit. Yet, whenever he bent his head to drink, the water would recede, disappearing into the earth. And whenever he reached for a piece of fruit, the branches would sway away, just out of his grasp, lifted by an unseen wind. He suffered eternal hunger and thirst, surrounded by food and water he could never reach, forever tantalized by what he could not possess. Be unwitting. Nymph, but equally poignant tale of divine wrath. That of She was a beautiful princess, sometimes described as a nymph, living a seemingly idyllic life. One day, while walking by a lake with her sister and infant son, she came across a beautiful lotus flower. Delighted by its vibrant colors, she plucked it to show to her son. What she didn't know was that the lotus was, in fact, the nymph lotus, who had been transformed into a flower to escape the lustful pursuit of By plucking the flower, Driope had unwittingly caused Lotus pain, and perhaps even a second, final death. As Driope held the flower, she felt a tremor. Roots began to sprout from her feet, anchoring her to the ground. Her limbs transformed into branches, her skin into bark, her hair into leaves. Her sister, horrified, watched as Driope slowly became a black poplar tree. Even her infant son, who she held in her arms, was caught in the transformation, leaving a faint human cry embedded in the rustling leaves. Her crime, ignorance, her punishment, a complete and irreversible transformation, robbed of her humanity for an act entirely without malice. These are just a few of the famous ones, the whispered tales of divine retribution. Many others were punished for being too beautiful, too clever, for daring to possess a skill that rivaled a god's, or simply for being too mortal in a world ruled by immortal, capricious beings. The gods punished not from a sense of abstract justice, or even a desire for moral order. No. Their cruelty was often born from fragile ego, from wounded pride, from the slightest perceived insult or challenge to their absolute authority. In the end, their disproportionate punishments, their unending torments, were just another brutal inescapable way to remind mortals who held the power, who truly governed fate, and who would never tolerate even the smallest trespass into their divine domain. Their actions served as a chilling, everlasting warning. Fear the gods, for their wrath knows no bounds, and their mercy is as fleeting as a whisper on the wind. Segment 4. What it really meant to be a Greek god. To be a Greek god. Just the phrase itself evokes images of splendor, power, and absolute freedom. On the surface, it sounds like the ultimate dream. Infinite beauty that never fades. Unlimited power to shape the very fabric of the cosmos. And, perhaps most enticing of all, eternal life. A life untouched by illness, unmarred by decay. A continuous, shimmering existence. But as we drift deeper into the whispered myths, into the shadowed corners of their endless tales, a different truth, both poignant and profound, begins to emerge. It becomes achingly clear. For many, immortality was not a blessing, but a subtle, pervasive curse. No purpose, no end, the weariness of the unchanging. Consider the mortal coil, the fleeting human life. We, who walk the earth for a precious span, are driven by the very certainty of our end. Mortals fear death, yes, but in that fear lies a profound impetus for life. We strive, we build, we love, we forgive, for our time is finite. We experience hope, the intoxicating promise of tomorrow, and change, the endless ebb and flow of growth and decay. Our lives are a grand unfolding narrative, a cycle of beginnings and endings, triumphs and losses, leading us ever onward. The gods, however, had none of that. They didn't grow, not in the way we understand growth. Their forms were eternal, their powers immutable. Imagine the weariness of endless repetition. They repeated the same feuds, driven by ancient slights. They enacted the same betrayals, born of perennial They indulged in the same passions, endlessly rekindled but never truly fulfilled. Nothing ever truly ended for them. No great resolution, no final act. Just an endless tableau of familiar scenes playing out on the cosmic stage, their roles forever etched in stone. They were like the most exquisite and powerful puppets, yet without the liberating snap of a broken string, bound to their own unchanging nature. Human emotions, no growth. The agony of stagnation, and what of their souls? This is where the true tragedy often lies. For all their divine might, for all their ethereal forms, the Greek gods were strikingly, intimately human in their emotions. They felt jealousy that could shake mountains, loneliness that echoed through empty palaces, and desire that burned with an intensity we can scarcely comprehend. Like us, they craved recognition, love, and sometimes, simply attention. Yet, unlike us, they never aged. There was no gentle passage of time to soften their edges, no twilight years to bestow wisdom. They never truly needed to learn, for their power compensated for any lack of understanding, with no illness to humble them, no genuine hardship to temper their spirits, no mortality to force introspection. Why grow? Why forgive? Why change? Why truly evolve when the consequences of stagnation never truly caught up to them? Many gods, in this eternal stasis, were like immortal teenagers, trapped in their worst selves. Their fleeting whims became grand decrees. Their petty grievances escalated into epic wars. Their capacity for love was often overshadowed by possessiveness, their generosity by expectation, their wisdom by an unyielding pride. Think of Hera's endless, bitter jealousy, Zeus's insatiable desires, or Poseidon's quick temper. These were not phases to be outgrown, but perpetual states, amplified by their immortality. Their passions were boundless, but without the refining fire of consequence, they often consumed rather than created. It was a tragic paradox. Beings of infinite potential, yet often shackled by their own unchanging emotional landscapes. Disconnected from the world they made. The silence of a... Then, there is the most poignant aspect of their fading. As human civilizations shifted, as new philosophies arose, as mortals slowly, subtly, stopped believing in the old ways, the gods began to fade. Not to die, for true death was impossible for them, but to become irrelevant. Imagine the slow, creeping silence in their grand halls, the lessening of prayers, the dimming of their once vibrant cults. They became like actors still performing after the audience has gone home. Their voices echoing in an empty theater, their divine dramas playing out to no one. Some myths suggest they simply retreated to the stars, becoming constellations, distant and glittering, their former glory reduced to cosmic patterns. Others whisper that they diffused back into the very elements they once commanded, becoming the wind that sighs through ancient ruins, the restless sea, the silent, enduring earth. Perhaps they are still watching us, from the whispers of the breeze or the depths of the ocean. Remembering a time when their names were on every tongue, when their whims shaped destiny, when their existence was intertwined with the very pulse of humanity. Final reflection as you drift off now, enveloped by the soft whispers of eternity. Allow yourself to ponder. Would you truly, deeply want to live forever? Would you choose an existence of endless repetition, unburdened by consequence, untouched by the profound lessons that only vulnerability and loss can teach? Would you trade your messy, changing, sometimes painful, but undeniably beautiful life, a life filled with growth, discovery, and the sweet sting of fleeting moments, for a perfection that never moves, never truly evolves, never ends? Being a Greek god, with all its outward glory and absolute power, seemed like the ultimate aspiration. But once you turn out the lights on that dazzling illusion, once you truly contemplate the endless, unchanging nature of their existence, you might realize you wouldn't last a day on Mount Olympus. Your human soul, with its yearning for purpose, its capacity for growth, its need for connection and resolution, would find their immortality a gilded cage. Good night. Sleep well. May your dreams not be eternal. For the sweetest dreams are those that come to a gentle end, leaving you refreshed and ready for a new dawn. But may they be worth it. Ending outro. If you made it all the way here, thank you. Truly, thank you for letting me keep you company tonight. If you enjoyed this journey through myth and memory, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. I read every single one, even from the underworld. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We're always sharing little sparks of ancient stories to brighten your scroll. And now, as the gods fall silent, as the stars take their place above your dreams, I'll leave you with this. Sleep well, travel of time. The myths will wait for you, and so will I. Until next time, may your dreams be strange, and your rest be legendary. Good night.